Welcome to episode 4 of Conscious Caregiver Conversations. Happy November, wherever you are in the world. Today is November 1st in South Florida. And my sweet sister Samantha, who will be joining us, is waking up to November 2nd. So we will give her a minute to join. Coming to you live from my balcony. So if anyone has any difficulty hearing me at any time, please let me know in the chat. There's Miss Samantha. She has arrived.
Good morning.
Good morning. There you are. I am coming live from my balcony, so I decided I needed to be outside today. So
yes, I wish we had the internet capacity for me to sit outside, because it is a beautiful day, beautiful morning here. But yes, I will definitely lose. I will lose internet if I go sit outside.
Yeah, I can understand that. Hopefully you can hear me okay, right?
I can hear you. From my screen, I can't see you, Jenna, but as long as you can see me and hear me, then I'm all good with that.
Well, I can hear and see you, and I am sorry that for whatever reason you've not been able to see me. That's kind of a bummer.
That's okay. It happened last week as well, and I'm wondering if it's something in the settings, but I will keep fiddling and we will unglitch it. That is part of, I guess, going with the flow, isn't it? And probably just the amount of energy and capacity that we're sharing is glitching some systems at the moment. So it's fine. As long as our audience can see and hear us and all the things, then I'm quite happy to just be chatting with you. And yeah.
Right. Well, without further ado, we can go ahead and get started with our conversation this evening. And so this is a little twofold tonight. After some sharing and some different interactions with individuals in the healthcare space over the week, I really felt compelled to come in initially and be very intentional about what this journey actually means, because it's exactly that. It is a journey. It is a choice that you make, and so certainly if this journey is not for you, that's okay. There is no judgment. There is no shame, as we will say week in and week out. And this is really something that has to resonate for you. But it's really about making a commitment to yourself, acknowledging, recognizing that perhaps what you've been doing to this point isn't working. And for some people, such as myself, even though I have always resonated with this type of work, for me to really dive in and make the commitment, I had to hit rock bottom. And for some people, that's what it's going to take, is rock bottom. And I see you, I am you, I understand you, and again, I don't judge you. But when people view some of the episodes that we make, and particularly if it's just a snippet of that episode, I really want to invite you to have an open mind, to have an open heart, and to consider that this is making a commitment to yourself. It's all about making a commitment to you. And I'd really invite you to reflect on previous commitments that you've made to yourself and how well you've done with sticking to them as well. Because making a commitment is truly what that means. Making a commitment, it's not giving up on yourself, it's not giving up on the work, it's not giving up on the journey, even when the journey feels hard, which I will tell you, even after 3 years of doing this work, there are many times where it feels hard. But the freedom and the growth and the quantum leaps that are on the other side of the hard are worth it. And that's why you commit. It's like with anything, whether it's making new dietary choices, making a new fitness commitment, whatever it might be, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be discomfort, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but that is where the growth is happening. And so when you can see the bigger picture and have a vision for where that work is going to take you in the future, it makes the commitment worth it. And eventually, as you stick with it, you will see the results of that commitment. So I really felt like I needed to come in and really speak to the fact that this is a commitment, it is a journey, it's not always easy, it is a complete shift in consciousness, because you are truly removing yourself from a victim consciousness and putting yourself in a space of, I have the power, I am a sovereign being, and I can understand how that mentality, that space, that energy can be very challenging for those of us who have worked in healthcare, because it is completely understandable that you would feel like a victim. Completely understandable. You walk into work and you are essentially handed whatever those challenges might be and told, here you go, do the best you can. Meanwhile, I would say the majority of us all go into healthcare with a desire to help people. And so when we feel like our ability to be able to help those people is hampered or jeopardized or challenged in any way, it is completely normal to go into fear, to go into anger, to go into frustration. So I say all of this and I come to you from a place of complete understanding. But I would also encourage you and invite you to consider, and don't take this as snarky or snotty, but how is what you're currently doing working for you? How is that working for you? How long have you been doing it?
I love that.
Have you been going into work? Have you been finding yourself in this space, in this frequency of frustration, fear, anger? Our mentor even talked about it today, victim consciousness. I don't want to dive too deep into that right now, but it is something that needs to be addressed, because when you are allowing yourself to be in that frequency, you are an energetic match for more of that frequency. And that's what this is all about. That is where it comes back to taking our power back, standing in our sovereignty, and making conscious, intentional choices to do it differently. And initially, it is going to be the inner work. So it really, the end of the day, this journey is a conscious choice and commitment to self, and it's not for everybody, and we recognize that. We recognize that. But we would encourage you and invite you to come to these conversations, to view these clips with an open mind and an open heart, because I can tell you that the 9 years leading up to my journey, I was doing it the other way, and it did not work for me. It did not work for me to the point of burnout. And again, for some of you, that's what it's going to take. But if we can invite you to this process and help to prevent that for you, we want to do that. So that's why we're holding this space. That's why we are offering this shift in consciousness, this shift in mindset, and this shift in energy. Also, recognizing that we are here to meet you where you are at. And that is why we want you to come to the table with things that you would like us to talk about. That's why we invite you to let us know, to reach out to us in the DMs, to comment on our question box in the stories, to leave comments for us about how would you approach this situation or that situation from a state of higher consciousness. Because we want to make this tangible for you, and we also want to meet you where you are. So that is really what this is all about. And we are super passionate about it because we are both still in the healthcare space. We won't always be, and that's okay. But right now we are, and we are showing up to our jobs every day, still being challenged, still facing difficult situations, but armed with the tools to navigate it from a space of higher consciousness. And as the both of us have said week in and week out to this point, episode 4, we would not be able to navigate some of the things that we've navigated before we started this process. So it does work, and we are living proof. The 2 women sitting in front of you holding these conversations each week are living proof that the journey works, because we are still there and we are still navigating it. Again, the whole idea, and I just want to kind of close with this last thought as we move into the next space of this conversation, which I'm going to kind of hand over to you, Sam. But the whole idea for us is that we are now in a space where we are not looking to run from healthcare. We are looking to transcend and ascend where we're at now. And that is a completely different energy. That is a completely different frequency. The Jenna of 3 years ago ran away. The Jenna now is still facing challenges and still has rough days, but the Jenna now is ascending, not running. That's a very important distinction and a complete result of this journey.
Definitely. And as always, Jenna, I feel like there are so many things to unpack, even in that relatively simple conversation that you've just shared. So what we're going to do is I want to share an actual tangible example of how becoming aware, becoming a conscious caregiver impacts your day, like actually impacts your shift. But before we do that, there are a couple of really important points, Jenna, I think you brought up. You might get to a point of burnout, and then before we realize that something isn't working. And I just want you to know that firstly, there is support out there if you are at the stage of being burnt out, if you're mentally, physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted, if you're feeling frazzled, all the different things, if you're feeling anxious. all those things, please seek out the support. Some of them are coaches and mentors, like what Jenna and I do. Some, it might be work colleagues, it might be, programs that you can attend. There's a lot of different support. So first of all, if you're hitting burnout or you're there, that's okay. That is simply a very big sign that we need to try something different, because what we have been doing is not working, which is exactly what Jenna said. And I have made notes, Jenna, because there's so many powerful things that come through your conversations that I really wanted to touch on. As also Jenna said, this is a journey, this is a progress. It's not something that you're like, oh yeah, I want to try this today, and then everything magically falls into place. It's a journey, and that's why it's a commitment, because this is not a quick fix solution, but what it does is it impacts daily, and it impacts greatly. So it's a journey, and having that in the back of your mind just allows you to give yourself a lot of grace and a lot of patience as you're working through different challenging areas, which of most healthcare areas are challenging in a lot of different ways. It's also important to note that when we talk about having this commitment to self and having this real self-responsibility, that does not mean we are talking about self-blame. That does not mean everything is your fault. That does not mean anything is your fault. It is more of an empowerment tool that we take ownership of what we can take ownership of. And that includes this commitment. So that is why it isn't for everyone, and that's okay, like Jenna said. But it's very important to also make that distinction that this is not about self-blame. And actually, Jenna and I are not in the space of even blaming the healthcare system or blaming executive or, the C-suite or your higher managing structures. Like, we're not in the place of blaming, because that doesn't actually work and it doesn't actually solve anything. So this is not about self-blame. It's not about system blame at all. This is about just taking responsibility and ownership for what we can and what we can control, which is ourselves. So that is very important to know as well. And I just want to say, before I go into a very clear example, which will resonate probably with a number of you, is that when we talk about committing to becoming a conscious caregiver and that commitment to self, and Jenna, please add in here, what we believe a conscious caregiver is that commitment to. So it's that commitment to self. It's a commitment to self-responsibility, like I just spoke about. It's that commitment to being self-aware and knowing that if something is challenging and triggering, activating, unsettling, whatever it might be, that we look into that further, that we can seek supports when we need to, when we can debrief when we need to. It means taking that time to reflect, taking that time to develop personally, which we call a lot of personal development or PD work as part of our professional practice. But it's not just that clinical side. It's actually that personal, that heart-centered side, because most of us are in this caregiving profession to care for others, which is a heart-centered process. So it's the commitment to that self-journey, that self-responsibility, the personal development, the emotional development, and then really truly wanting to come from a place of responding and not reacting, coming to that place of calm rather than anxious and flighty. Now, I understand that, in a trauma situation, we're not going to be zen calm, but it's coming from that center and then expanding out from there, rather than just being up here, fight or flight, anxious, very frazzled all the time. That's not good for our body. That's not good for our surroundings at all. So making that commitment to self can mean a lot of these different things. It means a commitment to your own self-practice in whatever that looks like. It can even mean a commitment to a spiritual practice if you have that as well. So it's coming back to center on what your values are and how that emanates into your professional career and into the healthcare space. Did I get that about right, Jenna? Is there anything you would like to add about what we're talking about in regards to being a conscious caregiver? What are we committing to when we're committing to self? Is there anything else we can add that you would add?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you did a really great job of describing what it is to be a conscious caregiver and the idea of that commitment, like we had talked about, taking radical responsibility, realizing that we are just part of a puzzle of a much bigger picture and not getting stuck in the minutia of what's going on around us. One of my favorite quotes that I use when things are becoming very stressful or it just feels like there's a lot going on that myself or my team is getting stuck in or perhaps even obsessing over a little bit is to remember that we are just a speck of dust in the universe. And it's those kinds of thought processes where we realize that there's a much bigger picture, there's a much bigger plan to all of it. We can really start to take a step back and zoom out, which is another piece of being a conscious caregiver, of being really intentional, of slowing down, because when you take that time to slow down and be intentional and take a step back and take a few deep breaths and realize that that moment, that thing, that interaction does not define you or who you are, the shackles come off. And this is what it's all about, is we begin to realize that so much of what we have learned, become, believed to this point has really shackled us to a version of us, like we talked about last week, that simply isn't the truth. And so, as Samantha has said, there's so many pieces there to unpack. There's so much about being a conscious caregiver that is very multidimensional and multifaceted. But at the end of it all, it comes down to self preservation, freedom, realizing that the only person that we truly have control over is ourselves, and just taking that self responsibility to try and show up as the best version of ourselves, knowing that we're not perfect, that perfection doesn't live here, as we've said time and time again, and just trying to learn from each opportunity, each challenge, each hurdle, and make the commitment to do it differently. But again, showing up with a lot of grace for ourselves, a lot of compassion for ourselves, a lot of love for ourselves. And when we do that, when we show ourselves the grace, love, and compassion that we deserve, we can better show that same grace, love, and compassion to our patients, our colleagues, our leadership, our families. That's what it's all about. That is what it's all about. John Lennon said it best: all you need is love. And that's what we're trying to teach.
It really is, isn't it? It's coming back to that heart center, like I spoke about, and being able to really come from a place of love. And also, to clarify to our audience, we don't just mean the emotion love, which is, we certainly might not love all our colleagues and all our patients, but it's coming from that frequency, and that caring comes from a place of love. And we are talking about being a conscious caregiver, so it's that frequency and that vibration of love, rather than, we're not just talking about the emotion of love either. So be aware of that too, but it is really coming back to that heart center. So that's so beautiful there, Jenna. I will share now briefly. So this is how it can impact your day. Like, this is actually examples from my life and my work in the operating theatre, that it can have a major impact. So if I'll do a version of this without using any of the tools that I now do, and then I will explain how my day actually went using the tools that I used. So you start your day, and you missed your alarm for whatever reason, because you're so exhausted, because you're on call the night before and you were up. I mean, in theatre we do on call, it might be night shift, whatever it is, so you missed your alarm. So you get up and you're frantic, and you might have kids or pets that you need to feed, and everyone's a bit frantic in the morning. And you keep going and you get everyone fed, you get everyone in the car, animals fed, whatever, your partner, whoever you might live with, housemates. And you hop in the car and then you're like, oh my goodness, like I'm going to miss clinical handover or beginning of the shift handover. And so I sort of, go a little bit faster than I should. And I get pinged by, we have speed cameras here in Australia, or, the police officer pulls you over, whatever it might be. So then that makes you even later. And then you're like, oh my gosh, now I've got a fine. How am I going to pay for that? Like all the things. So you get to find a parking spot as well, because parking is always a thing here in WA, but I don't know if it is in America. But anyway, you find a parking spot, but then you have to walk 15 minutes to where you need to actually go into your department. In theatre, we also need to get changed. So you hop in, you go into your change rooms, try and get changed. Can't find the scrubs in your size. So anyway, you've got pants that you need to tie up and a top that's too small. And you missed handover by this stage. You come into the operating theatre, or adapt this to any space that you might be in. You come into your department, and because you missed that initial handover, you're sort of a bit frazzled and a bit lost as to where to go from here. You know what equipment you need, or you know what you might need to do, but the order of things, you haven't been able to source that equipment, or you haven't been able to check that before the flow of the day starts. So in the operating theatre, we're starting to move through our list, and our list is very full and it's very busy, and you're getting demands from both the anaesthetist and the surgeon need this, and you're the senior clinician in the theatre, so you'll go. And before you know it, it's the end of the day. You haven't drunk enough water. You've barely eaten. You're really feeling really shitty. You've got that speeding fine that is now going to take away maybe your day's pay that you've just worked a day for nothing, in a way. You felt like you haven't connected with any of your patients, barely connected with any of your colleagues, except for that anaesthetist and surgeon that have really been on your case. And oh my goodness, I can even tell in my voice, just describing this, it's frantic. It's frazzled, and then you need to go back home and try and relax when you're feeling like this. So can we just all take a deep breath here, because even in my voice, like, that's not how I run my days now, and I'm feeling frazzled. So let's just take a deep breath in and out, whichever way you can. Really center back in, because even I could feel, just speaking an example of this day, can feel the energy and feel the frazzlement, can feel my heart race, because I've had those days before. Years ago, that was pretty much what my days sometimes would look like, especially if I was exhausted and missed my alarm, and it would snowball. So this week, this is how I approached my day. So I woke up and I snoozed the alarm quite a few times, because I have been feeling really exhausted, not because of on-call, but just being a mum, all the things. And so I did wake up a bit later. I decided to go outside for 5 minutes and just ground my feet barefoot on the ground. Didn't do anything fancy, just 5 minutes, all I had. Yes, I was going to be late. I just accepted that. I had a plan. I was going to call my coordinator in the car on the way to the hospital and just say, look, I'm running late. I'm sorry. That's it. I'm sorry. So I grounded myself for 5 minutes. I did get my children sorted, and I moved with an intentionally intentionally slower pace. There's no rush in my life anymore. Granted, when we're at the hospital and it is an emergency and it is a code, there is rush. I understand that. But this is in my own house, in my own time. I moved with intention. I knew I was going to be late. I accepted that fact. So I got the children ready. Everything was much smoother in that regard. So I managed to get them to drop off into childcare and their care. That actually took less time, because I wasn't trying to push them away to begin with. Mum's going to work now. Now's time to go there. So that actually took less time. Then, because I was thinking clearly, I actually knew there was another route to work that bypassed some roadworks that were happening. and it actually is through the forest, which was really, really pretty. So I decided to take that way instead. I ended up through this bypass in the forest, watching the sun rise through the trees. It was actually really beautiful and really calming. I decided to also listen to one of my favourite podcasts during that time, so I wasn't even zoned into work. I then called my coordinator on the way. That was in between the podcast. I called the coordinator and said, look, I'm terribly sorry, I'm going to be late. She's like, no worries. I'll set up, I'll put plans in place to make sure your theatre's starting. And then I don't get a speeding fine because I'm not speeding. And I actually, because I took that bypass, I actually rock up to work 5 minutes earlier than what I thought. But I still sat in the car and I took a few deep intentional breaths. Again, that probably didn't even take 5 minutes, but I'm like, hang on a minute. I just want to center in. I'm feeling really tired today. I had brought an extra large bottle of water as well, so I had time to think about that. I brought an extra large bottle of water, and I brought a couple of snacks because I tend to not want to eat too much when I'm really, really tired. So I brought snacks instead, healthy snacks. So I took a couple of deep breaths and thought, I need to remember to hydrate. I need to remember to eat as well. Let's go into work. I go into work, still couldn't find the correct scrub sizes, but I laughed it off. It was more, oh, this is life. This is, it happens. And then I arrive into my theatre. They knew I was going to be later. So the coordinator had been able to step in and sort of get the initial things, get the equipment ready, and my day flowed from there. The anaesthetist and surgeon were still the same personalities, but I was able to communicate with them in a much clearer fashion. I was coming from a much calmer, centered space. And through that, and because I had become aware that I was exhausted and that I needed to hydrate and I needed to eat, I intentionally worked my team and worked the list around being able to do that. Again, I understand you can be scrubbed for a 12-hour case. You're not going to be able to do that. Actually, there are ways to hydrate, but anyway, I understand there are challenges there, but the point I'm trying to make is that when you come from a calmer, grounded, centered space, which I believe standing outside for 5 minutes barefoot in the morning and taking deep breaths before I entered the workplace, it allowed me to think more clear. It allowed me to put some self-care practices into place that didn't take too long and didn't take too much of my energy. But as soon as you get up to that frazzled state, like we know when there is a code, when there is an emergency, people think differently. That's why we have, cheat sheets to follow. That's why we have acronyms to follow, because in a heightened state, we don't think the same. So by doing all of that, can you even tell how I'm describing my day? Yes, I'm still exhausted. Yes, the surgeon and anaesthetist were still the same. But the way I was able to manage it, and I was able to come home and greet my children and my family in a much calmer state. And again, I knew I wanted to go to bed early. I had forecasted that I was going to get takeaway for dinner and made that plan. And this is how impacting, and I'm sure it did impact my patients that I looked after. I was able to clearly work through all the safety checklists. I was able to clearly provide correct patient care. I was able to influence my colleagues from my state, especially my other nursing colleagues, even though the anaesthetist and surgeon were still the same. So that is a very basic example, but it's a real life, real example that years ago, had I missed the alarm and been late, I would have immediately gone up stress level 5, I need to get there, all the things. And it didn't serve anyone, especially not myself, and it didn't help my colleagues, it didn't help my team, it didn't help my patients. But by putting different things in place, being aware, being self-responsible, and doing what I can, sometimes we miss our alarm, sometimes we are so exhausted, and sometimes we still need to go to work for whatever reason that might be. This is where part of the power, or the power of conscious caregiving, this is one way that it can help your actual day and your actual shift. So I'm mindful of time, Jenna.
Yes.
We always talk a lot, but I just really wanted to explain that with the depth that I could, to show how impactful that can be. but I might leave it with you to finish off any points if you'd like to, and then we'll probably close up for today. But this is where if you are listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, this happened today, how could I handle that better, or what could I have done to navigate that? That's a big part of why we're asking and always open to what situations, what challenges are you facing. We can always de-identify your hospital or your workplace and yourself if you want, and be able to guide you and mentor you. Again, that's the power of having an excellent mentor or coach that you align with that knows healthcare, because they can really help you navigate specific clinical scenarios from a conscious caregiver perspective.
Yes, absolutely. And I really just want to emphasize how the differences in your examples from the first one to the second one just felt different. Like, that's part of this conscious journey, is notice and have an awareness around what that felt like in your body when she went from her first kind of frantic example to the conscious, intentional, grounded example. And the difference there is also this idea of presence. And so one of the things that I just wanted to point out before we close out with regard to your example was, yes, we do kind of enter this different energy when we have to respond to an emergency. But with that being said, if you are in that present, conscious, intentional space, your ability to react to those emergencies is going to be different. There's going to be transformation there, because chances are, and I know this isn't always the case, especially, in an OR suite where things are going really well and then, oh, oops, I nicked something I shouldn't. That sometimes, is a little like there's no way to prepare for that kind of thing. But I know, coming from especially the intensive care space, which is a lot of my bedside experience, there were a lot of clues and signs of when my patient was going to start to decline in a lot of instances. Not always, but in a lot of instances. And when I was more present and more conscious and intentional and grounded, I was able to catch those signs earlier. So I really challenge you to play with that energy of being conscious and intentional and present when you're caring for your patients, especially in an inpatient or intensive care setting.
Casey, Mummy's on the phone, please.
Where you have the ability to track and follow and trend how your patients are doing, because I am going to bet that you're actually going to see more things with your patients when you're in that conscious, intentional, grounded space. So that's what is really beautiful about this work as well, because we truly can, when we're really taking care of ourselves and really being conscious and intentional with ourselves, that immediately translates to those that we're there to care for, which is why we went into this work to begin with. So there's just so much beauty that can come out of this work for our patients also, which is who we're there for. One thing that I did do before we got on the call today is I pulled a card for the collective from the Soul Up Way Ascension Oracle deck by Echo Summerhill, who is our mentor. Hopefully you guys can see that.
Oh, I can't see it, Jenna. So what one is it?
It's the box for the Soul Up Ascension Oracle deck. I haven't shown the card just yet.
Oh, okay.
The card, and I'm not at all surprised, you guys, you are going to learn that there are no coincidences in this work. They do not exist, okay? The card is Sovereignty and Truth.
I love it.
And it says genuine, autonomous, honorable. So I'm going to read this for you guys real quick. And I will also share the information for this card in the comments. Let me just...
And don't worry if I have to go, Jenna. My children are trying to knock down my door. So if I hop off, just keep going.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So this is our wrap-up. Sovereignty and truth. As human beings, we are all born with inherent power and sovereignty. It is our birthright to embody these qualities and live our lives with a deep sense of inner strength and self-assurance. When you fully embrace your power and sovereignty, hello, what have we been talking about? You no longer feel the need to defend or explain yourself to others. You understand that your truth is yours alone, and you do not require anyone else's approval or validation to live your life authentically. This is not to say that you should disregard the opinions and perspectives of others. However, when you are grounded in your power and sovereignty, you can hear what others have to say without feeling the need to take it on as your own truth, shedding those layers. You can discern what resonates with you and what does not, and you can respond from a place of clarity and inner knowing. Living in your power and sovereignty requires you to take responsibility for your life and your choices. You must be willing to look within and examine your belief patterns and behaviors. You must be willing to release anything that does not serve you and cultivate practices that support your growth and expansion. Hello, this is why we're here, okay?
Hello. Oh my goodness.
When you embody your power and sovereignty, you radiate a sense of confidence and self-assurance, and that confidence and self-assurance is going to set you free. You attract experiences and people that are aligned with your highest good, and you navigate life with grace and ease. Okay, so the next part is a repeat aloud. Hopefully I can read it. My eyes are so bad. And so you can let my voice be your voice, or you can repeat it to yourself along with me. I am a powerful being, and these are very, these things that you read aloud, these mantras, these affirmations, are actually really important. You can use my voice as your voice if you want, but on a cellular level, when you speak to yourself, your cells respond. That's super important. I am a powerful being with the capacity to create the life I desire. I trust in my inner wisdom and intuition, and I know that I do not need to defend or explain myself to anyone. I embrace my sovereignty and live my life with joy, purpose, and authenticity.
That needs to be we need to adapt that mantra for the conscious caregiver. I think, Jenna.
Yes.
I'll put that down as a to-do list.
Amen.
Definitely.
And
before I hop off, yes, before I hop off, I just did want to mention as well, we're having a time change next week because of daylight saving. So we will update all the graphics and bits and pieces, but I believe it will be 6 p.m. your time, Jenna, which is Eastern Standard Time, and it will be 7 a.m. Australian Western Standard Time, but we'll update all the graphics on that just before I forget. But I am going to have to leave, I'm sorry, for my kiddos, but I love you lots, and please DM, comment, everyone share this as you feel called and guided, because this is very important work, and this is actually it is changing the healthcare system from within.
Yes, 100%. That's what we're here to do. So it was a pleasure as always. Thank you all for those of you who were able to join live. Thank you for those who watched the replay. Please like, share, comment, slide into our DMs, ask us questions. We are not only here to share our wisdom, but we are here to coach you. We are you. We love you. We wish you the best week, and we will see you next week.